Hey everybody, Casey here with Life Abstract Gaming, and today I want to talk about the movie adaptation for the best-selling novel Ready Player One.
This is the Oasis. It's a place where the limits of reality are your own imagination. People come to the Oasis for all the things they can do, but they stay because of all the things they can be. I'm here talking to all of you now because our future's being threatened. Go, go, go! Ask yourself, are you willing to fight?
Ready Player One is a book written by first-time author Ernest Cline in 2011. It's set on a dystopian, near-future Earth where climate change and overpopulation has hamstrung the world financially and socially. The great majority of people then turn to escapism in the virtual reality society of Oasis, created by the eccentric genius James Halliday, who left behind clues to an Easter egg hunt upon his death. The first person to solve all of his clues and challenges would be rewarded with the entirety of Halliday's fortune and full control over the Oasis. What made the book so interesting was the fact that the contest revolved around deciphering trivia based on pop culture from the 80s, which was a time period Halliday grew up in. This led to endless references to video games, TV shows, and movies that had lasting impacts on our real-world culture, making the read a loving nostalgia trip for people who were kids during that time. The very same day the publishing deal was wrapped up, Warner Bros. Bought the film rights and Steven Spielberg was signed on to direct. At this point, I'm going to go into detail about the plot and my impressions, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you care, you can consider this your spoiler warning. I'm of two minds regarding the visuals of this movie. While I understand that they seem to be intentionally drawing a distinction between the real world and the Oasis by making the characters completely CG while in the virtual world, none of the virtual characters really look that great. Especially the main character Parzival, who is just creepy to look at and gets way too many close-ups. It comes off as a design decision where the Oasis is purposefully cartoony, but 90% of the big set pieces and action happen in the Oasis in full CG, and that isn't always exciting to watch. With that being said, seeing the mashup of video game, cartoon, and movie characters racing and battling was definitely cool, even if they looked better in their respective properties. The inclusion of all these other properties in this movie for the most part never upstaged the plot. It was genuinely exciting when you caught glimpses of Halo Spartans charging a hill or saw Chun-Li kicking the crap out of people, but I wasn't disappointed that these things were going on in the background because the story held its own. There's a through line about the obsession with the virtual being a barrier to interpersonal connections, which is a real concern that we should have, especially as more VR technology starts to advance. The movie goes to much greater lengths to try and drive that point home than the book ever did, but whether you prefer a message like that in this kind of a story is more of a personal taste. As with most written-to-visual adaptations, if you're someone who has read the book first, oftentimes all you can see is what's different, and it can distract from enjoying an otherwise decent film. I feel like this is Ready Player One's biggest hurdle, because there's a lot that changes from the book to the movie. I won't run down what all those changes are, but for the most part, I found myself agreeing with the decisions to omit certain sections and update others. But I do want to call attention to a couple of changes. When Parzival's best friend H is revealed to be a black lesbian, it's nowhere near as impactful as when the reader and the main character assume she was another white male. Her reasoning for wanting to be seen on equal ground in the Oasis, as opposed to a minority of a minority in the real world, is lost since she paraded around as a giant male ogre, which was coded pretty black in its speech and mannerisms. On the flip side, a really positive change was Artemis being the one to infiltrate IOI and take down the shield from the inside instead of Parzival. It saves her plotline from ending up as a damsel in distress story, which is what seemed like was going to be the case for a second there. The changes for the character Iraq were probably the best of all, as he was little more than an annoyance in the early chapters of the book who was forgotten about. In the movie, his character was genuinely funny and badass. Of the bad guys, he was the most multidimensional, despite never getting to see him in the real world. Speaking of the bad guys, they were probably the weakest element. Sorrento was basically a human business, whose only motivation was increasing earnings for no other reason than the possibilities were there to do so. His underling Finale also lacked any reasonable motivation for being so ruthless as to attempt to murder teenagers. Their evil intentions didn't really line up with the sometimes awkward conversations and situations that they would find themselves in over the course of the film, and the ending where Sorrento hesitates to shoot Parzival comes out of nowhere. I still can't understand what he may have been thinking in that moment to make him not go through with his original intent. There's just nothing there to speculate on. It's a total mystery. While the entire thing comes off as much more lighthearted than the tone I originally felt, I did enjoy what it turned out to be. Ready Player One jam-packs countless, hugely iconic franchises into a single film and manages to make them all take the back seat to its own endearing story. Unlike the book, which focused far more heavily on the 80s, the movie widens its nostalgic appeal and makes it a movie you can enjoy just as much with your kids as you can with your parents, and you can all get a sneak peek at what our future is going to look like together. So, what are your thoughts on the movie version of Ready Player One? Did you read the book? Did you like some of the changes that they did on the movie versus the story? Let us know. We're listening.